What happens when a wealthy man mocks a starving family and claims his wallet is their only god? Lito thought his money was power, until a silent stranger in a white shirt stepped into his life. What happened next changed everything forever. Lito lived in the heart of Metro Manila, where success is measured by the roar of an engine and the crispness of a barong Tagalog. He worked in real estate, flipping condos and chasing commissions, until his soul felt as dry as the pavement in EDSA during summer. To Lito, life was a balance sheet, and anything that didn't bring in pesos was a waste of breath. His mother-in-law, Corazon, was his greatest frustration. She lived in a cramped apartment in Tondo, yet her mouth was always filled with verses from a tattered Bible. "Lito," she would say softly, "God provides what your bank account cannot." He would only scoff, adjusting his gold watch. He believed in what he could touch, count, and control. This obsession with status made the news from the Visayas unbearable. His wife's sister, Maria, was dying in a hospital in Cebu. A simple infection had turned into a nightmare, and now her family was starving because every single centavo went to the doctors. Lito sat in his air-conditioned dining room, scrolling through photos Corazon had sent. He saw images of empty rice pots and Maria's hollow, sunken eyes. Instead of feeling pity, he felt a strange, cold anger. "This is why your faith is a fairy tale, Ma," Lito snapped, pointing at the phone. "Your God allows children to cry for food while you pray? It is foolishness." Corazon held her Bible close to her chest. Her hands, wrinkled from years of laundry work, did not tremble. "It is a trial, Lito. God asks us to be his hands when others are broken." Lito laughed, a harsh sound that echoed against the marble walls. "Well, he is being very slow today. I guess you'll just have to wait for a miracle while they wither away." The air in the room felt heavy, like the moments before a typhoon hits the coast. A message flashed on the screen. Maria's husband hadn't eaten in 2 days, so the kids could have the last scoop of rice. They needed 15,000 pesos for antibiotics immediately, or she wouldn't last the night. Corazon didn't look at Lito. She simply closed her eyes and began to whisper in Tagalog, a low prayer that seemed to hum in the silence. Lito felt a physical heat rising in his chest. This wasn't just a tragedy. It felt like a challenge to his authority. "What are you doing?" he demanded, his voice cracking. She didn't answer. She just kept praying. Now the truth is about to be revealed, and a life hangs in the balance. If you believe that compassion is the greatest form of faith, please like this video and subscribe to our channel. Lito stepped forward and pointed a finger at the worn book in her lap. "Look at that thing. It's supposed to be powerful, right? But it's doing nothing." He paced the room like a trapped animal. "Your Bible can't buy medicine, Ma. It can't put fish on their table. Right now, your faith is a joke. Your Bible can't save them from hunger. Only my money can." He reached into his pocket, pulled out his leather wallet, and slammed it onto the table with a violent thud. "You see this? This is the only God in this house today. My money is the only salvation they have. Do you think Lito's wealth is enough to hide the emptiness in his heart? Or is there a debt he can never repay?" Corazon stopped her whispering. She opened her eyes, and for the first time, Lito saw no fear in them, only a deep, piercing sadness that made his expensive suit feel like a cheap costume. "You think I am a fool, Lito," she said. Her voice was steady, like the tolling of a bell in a quiet provincial church. "But you do not understand what this book is. It is not the provider. It is the commandment." She pointed at his leather wallet, still lying on the mahogany table. "The word says, 'Do not withhold good from those to whom it is due when it is in your power to act.'" She didn't beg for the money. She spoke as if she were reading his sentence. "You are not the savior, Lito. You are just a channel that has become blocked by pride. God is not allowing Maria to suffer. He is using her suffering to ask you one question. What kind of man are you?" Lito felt the air leave his lungs. He wanted to shout, to remind her whose house this was, but the words died in his throat. Her gaze held a gravity that made his wealth feel incredibly small. It was just paper and ink. He realized that in this moment, he was the one who was morally bankrupt. Without a word, he grabbed the 15,000 pesos. He didn't look at Corazon. He walked out, his leather shoes clicking loudly on the tiles. He drove through the chaotic Manila traffic in total silence. He reached a remittance center and sent every single peso to the hospital in Cebu. He expected to feel like a hero, but he only felt a profound, hollow ache. He had done the right thing, but it felt like an admission of a hidden weakness. He had bought their physical safety, but he had lost his grip on the world he thought he owned. 7 days passed in a strange, heavy quiet. Corazon never mentioned their argument again. She went about her chores, her worn Bible always nearby. News came from the Visayas that Maria had stabilized. The fever had broken, but Lito couldn't find peace. He started staying late at his office in Makati, staring at the city lights. The expensive drinks with his partners began to taste like ash. His car didn't feel fast enough anymore. The image he had built was a shell, and for the first time, he saw the void inside. One rainy Tuesday, Lito sat alone in his car near the Quiapo church. He watched the crowds of people, many of them poor, many of them struggling. Suddenly, the passenger door opened. A man sat down beside him. He wore a simple white shirt, stained with the dust of the city. His face was weathered by the sun, like a fisherman from the islands. He didn't say a word. He just sat there, breathing quietly. Lito froze, his hand moving toward his phone to call security. But then, the man turned his head. His eyes were not those of a stranger. They were eyes that seemed to know every secret Lito had ever hidden. The man reached out and placed a hand on the dashboard. His skin was rough, calloused from hard labor. "The weight of the gold is heavy, Lito," the man said softly, "but the weight of the truth is light." Lito felt his heart hammer against his ribs. He couldn't speak. He couldn't move. The man looked out at the rain-slicked street. "You gave the money because you were ashamed. Now give your heart because you are loved." Before Lito could respond, the man stepped out into the rain and vanished into the crowd. Lito sat in the darkness, the smell of clean rain and ozone filling his luxury car. His hands were shaking. He looked at his gold watch, then at the empty seat beside him. The silence was no longer deafening. It was expectant. He felt a strange urge to go home, not to his office, but to the small room where Corazon kept her Bible. He realized that the miracle wasn't the 15,000 pesos he sent to Cebu. The miracle was the fact that he was finally starting to feel the hunger he had mocked in others. If this moment of quiet truth touched your soul, please support this story with a like. Subscribe to our channel and write the word mercy in the comments if you believe God speaks in the silence. Lito could not sleep. The image of the man in the white shirt haunted him. He kept seeing those eyes in the reflection of his glass office windows and in the rear-view mirror of his car. Every time he tried to focus on a contract or a closing deal, the man's voice echoed, "The weight of the truth is light." He began to feel like a stranger in his own life. He walked through his house in Forbes Park, looking at the expensive paintings and the Italian marble floors. For years, these things were his armor. Now, they felt like cold, heavy stones pressing against his chest. He found himself standing outside Corazon's small room. The door was slightly ajar. He saw her sitting on the edge of her narrow bed, her silver hair glowing in the soft light of a single lamp. She wasn't praying this time. She was simply holding an old, faded photograph of Maria and the children. "Ma," Lito whispered, his voice sounding thin in the hallway. Corazon looked up, her face peaceful. "He was in my car, Ma. A man. He knew things. He didn't have to explain who he was." Corazon simply nodded, as if she had been expecting this visit for a long time. "He doesn't always come with thunder, Lito. Sometimes he just sits with us in our storms." Lito walked in and sat on a wooden stool, the kind he used to avoid because it was too humble. "I sent the money, but I feel empty. I thought doing a good deed would fix the hole inside me." Corazon smiled sadly. "You tried to buy your way out of guilt, my son, but God doesn't want your checkbook. He wants your surrender." Lito stayed there for hours, listening to the sounds of the Manila night outside, the distant sirens, the barking dogs, the hum of the city that never rests. He realized that for 40 years he had been running from the poverty of his childhood, running from the fear of being nothing, running from the quiet voice that told him he was lost. He looked at Corazon's Bible resting on the nightstand. It was thick with bookmarks and notes. It was a map of a life lived in trust, while his own life had been a map of conquest. Suddenly, the phone on the nightstand buzzed. It was a video call from Cebu. Corazon answered it, and the screen filled with the face of Maria's husband, Ramon. He was crying, but they were tears of relief. Behind him, Maria was sitting up in a hospital bed, pale but smiling. The children were waving pieces of bread at the camera. "Salamat, Lito, salamat sa Dios," Ramon shouted, his voice cracking with emotion. Lito looked at the screen. He saw the joy in their eyes, a joy that had nothing to do with the amount of money and everything to do with the fact that they were still together. He felt a sudden, sharp pang in his heart. It wasn't the pride of a donor. It was the humbleness of a witness. The moment of grace is near, and Lito is finally seeing the world through eyes of mercy. If you believe that true wealth is found in the love we give to others, please like this video and subscribe to our channel. Lito walked to the window and looked out at the city. He saw the flickering lights of the thousands of homes in the valley. He realized that each light was a soul, a struggle, a prayer. He turned back to Corazon. "I want to go there, Ma, to Cebu. I don't want to just send money anymore. I want to see them." Corazon stood up and walked to him, placing her hand on his shoulder. "That is the first step, Lito. The money saved her body, but your presence will heal the family." Does Lito have the courage to leave his kingdom behind and face the people he once looked down upon? The flight to Cebu was short, but for Lito, it felt like crossing an entire ocean. He didn't book a 5-star hotel at Mactan. Instead, he took a noisy, dusty tricycle to the outskirts of the city, where the houses were made of hollow blocks and rusty tin sheets. The humidity of the Visayas wrapped around him like a heavy blanket. He arrived at a small, cramped house where the smell of dried fish and laundry soap filled the air. When he stepped inside, the room went silent. Ramon stood up from a wooden bench, his face mirroring a mix of shock and deep respect. Maria was sitting in a rattan chair, her legs wrapped in bandages, but her eyes were bright. "Lito, you came?" she whispered, as if she were seeing a ghost. Lito looked at his polished shoes, now covered in the red dust of the neighborhood. "I had to see for myself," he said, his voice barely a murmur. He sat with them on the floor, sharing a simple meal of rice and mango soup. There were no golden spoons here, no chilled wine. But as they talked, Lito noticed something that broke his heart, more than the poverty. He saw how Ramon looked at Maria with a tenderness that no money could buy. He saw how the children shared their small portion of fish without a single complaint. They were laughing. They were living. They possessed a richness of spirit that made his life in Manila look like a desert. Lito reached into his bag and took out a small envelope with more money for the follow-up checkups. But as he handed it to Maria, his hand shook. He wasn't the God of this situation anymore. He was just a brother. "Forgive me," he said suddenly, the words catching in his throat. "I thought I was the one saving you, but being here, I think you are the one saving me." The sun began to set over the Cebu coast, painting the sky in shades of deep purple and orange. Lito walked out to the narrow street to catch some air. The neighborhood was alive with the sound of children playing and neighbors calling out to each other. He felt a strange sense of belonging he hadn't felt in years. He leaned against a stone wall, watching a group of men fixing a broken motorbike. Among them stood a man he recognized instantly. It was the same man from the car in Manila. He was wearing the same simple white shirt and dusty sandals. He was holding a wrench, helping the others, his hands grease-stained and busy. He looked up and caught Lito's eye. He didn't wave or shout. He simply gave a small, knowing nod, a gesture that said, "You are finally on the right path." The true journey doesn't end with a check. It begins with a change of heart. If you believe that we are all brothers and sisters under God's watchful eye, please like this video and subscribe to our channel. Lito felt a wave of peace wash over him, cooler and more refreshing than any air conditioner. He realized that Jesus wasn't just in the verses Corazon read, or in the quiet churches. He was here, in the dust, in the work, and in the shared struggles of the people. Lito didn't run to him. He didn't ask for a miracle. He simply stood there and breathed. He realized that his wealth was no longer a wall to hide behind, but a tool to build bridges. When the man in the white shirt turned back to his work, Lito felt as if a heavy chain had finally snapped from around his soul. He was no longer Lito the big boss. He was just Lito, a man who was learning how to truly live. Will Lito be able to carry this new light back to the shadows of his life in the big city? Lito returned to Manila, but the city felt different. The neon lights of Makati no longer looked like stars. They looked like distractions. He walked into his office, and for the first time, the sight of his glass trophies made him feel tired. He sat at his desk and looked at a pending contract for a new luxury development that would displace dozens of families in a nearby barangay. Before his trip to Cebu, he wouldn't have blinked. He would have seen only the profit. But now, he saw faces. He saw Maria's children. He saw the man in the white shirt. He realized that his power was a heavy responsibility, not a weapon. He called his assistant and told her to put the project on hold. "We need to find a way to build without destroying," he said, his voice calm and firm. That evening, Lito found Corazon in the kitchen. She was preparing a simple meal of tinola. The scent of ginger and green papaya filled the house. Lito sat at the table and placed his expensive smartphone face down. "I saw him again in Cebu, Ma," he said quietly. Corazon didn't stop stirring the pot. "He is everywhere where there is a heart willing to listen, Lito." Lito reached out and touched the edge of Corazon's old Bible, which was resting on the counter. "I spent my whole life thinking this book was a fairy tale for the weak. I thought my wallet was the only thing that could fix the world." He looked at his hands, which were clean and soft, compared to the calloused hands he had seen in the Visayas. "I was the one who was starving, Ma. I was starving for something real." A sudden storm broke over Manila, the rain lashing against the windows with a rhythmic intensity. The power flickered and then died, plunging the house into darkness. In the silence that followed, Lito felt no panic. He heard Corazon strike a match and light a small candle. The tiny flame danced, casting long shadows on the walls. In that flickering light, the expensive furniture disappeared, and only the two of them remained. Lito felt a strange, deep sense of gratitude for the darkness. It stripped away the illusions of his status and left only the truth of his soul. He realized that his life was like that candle, small and fragile, but capable of pushing back the shadows if he chose to burn for something more than himself. The darkness cannot hide a heart that has finally found its light. If you believe that even a small act of faith can change a life, please like this video, subscribe to our channel, and share this story with someone who needs hope. Lito took a deep breath, the cool air of the storm filling his lungs. He looked at the candle, and then at Corazon. "I'm going to use the money from the new project to build a clinic in Maria's neighborhood," he said. It wasn't a boast, it was a promise. Corazon smiled, the candlelight reflecting in her wise eyes. "God doesn't need your millions, Lito. He just needed you to realize that they aren't yours to begin with." As the rain continued to pour, Lito felt a peace that surpassed all understanding. He wasn't a hero, and he wasn't a saint. He was just a man who had finally learned that the most important things in life are the ones you can't buy, sell, or trade. Is Lito's transformation strong enough to withstand the pressures of his old life, or will the world pull him back into the shadows? Lito's change was not just a feeling, it became a series of difficult decisions. The boardroom in Makati was cold, smelling of expensive leather and recycled air. His business partners, men in tailored barongs, looked at him with confusion. "You want to cancel the Pasig project for a community center?" one asked, laughing. "Lito, you've lost your edge. There are 50 million pesos on the table." Lito looked at his reflection in the polished table. He saw a man who used to value those millions more than human breath. "The edge was cutting my own soul," Lito replied. He stood up, leaving the documents unsigned. He walked out of the skyscraper and into the humid heat of the street. He felt lighter with every step he took away from that life. He went to a small local carinderia and ordered a simple plate of rice and fish, sitting among the jeepney drivers and laborers. As he ate, he noticed a commotion near the busy intersection. A young boy, no older than 7, had tripped while trying to sell jasmine garlands. His flowers were scattered in the dirt, and a wealthy man in a Mercedes was shouting at him for blocking the path. Lito felt the old anger rise, but then he saw a familiar figure. A man in a simple white shirt was already there, kneeling in the dust beside the boy. He didn't argue with the driver. He didn't shout. He simply began to pick up the crushed flowers with hands that moved with incredible grace. The driver's face, once red with rage, suddenly paled. He stopped mid-sentence, his mouth hanging open. He looked at the man in white, then at his own expensive car, and slowly backed away. The crowd that had gathered went silent, feeling an authority that didn't need a uniform or a title. The man in white handed the flowers back to the boy. Though they had been stepped on, They now looked fresh, as if they had just been picked from a garden in the mountains. He then looked up and saw Lito standing by the food stall. He didn't say a word, but his smile was a reward more valuable than any commission Lito had ever earned. Lito realized that his new path wouldn't be easy. He would be mocked by his peers and lose his status in high society. But as he watched the man in white disappear into the sea of people, Lito knew he wasn't alone. He had traded his marble palace for a foundation built on the truth, and for the first time in 45 years, he wasn't afraid of the future. The world may judge you by what you own, but God sees what you give when no one is watching. If this story of quiet courage moves you, please like the video, subscribe to our channel, and share your thoughts in the comments. Lito walked back to his car, but he didn't drive to his club. He drove to the hospital to visit a clerk he had once fired for being late. He brought a small bag of fruit and a sincere apology. The man's shock turned into a tearful smile, and in that small hospital room, Lito felt the presence of the Christ again. It wasn't in a miracle of healing, but in the miracle of a broken relationship being mended. He understood now that his wealth was a gift to be shared, not a hoard to be guarded. He was finally learning to be the hands of God that Corazon had talked about so many times. The journey was long, but every step was filled with a new kind of light. Is it possible that the greatest miracles are the ones that happen inside the human heart, during a simple act of kindness? Lito returned to Cebu after 6 months, but he did not arrive as a wealthy patron from Manila. He wore a simple cotton shirt and sat in the back of a crowded jeepney, his expensive leather bag replaced by a canvas sack filled with school supplies. When he reached Maria's house, he found the clinic almost finished. It was a modest building, painted the color of the morning sky. Ramon was there, leading a group of volunteers from the neighborhood. No one was being paid a high salary, yet they worked with a passion Lito had never seen in his high-rise developments. Maria was walking now, slowly but steadily, her face glowing with a health that no amount of his previous salvation money could have guaranteed. She hugged him, and for the first time, Lito didn't worry about his clothes getting wrinkled. He felt the warmth of a family that had truly accepted him, not for his bank account, but for his presence. As the sun began to dip below the horizon, the community gathered for a simple meal to celebrate the clinic's near completion. Lito sat on a plastic crate, eating grilled fish with his hands. He looked around and saw the man in the white shirt again. He was sitting at the edge of the crowd, washing the feet of an elderly woman who had spent all day carrying water. He didn't use a golden basin, just a plastic pail and a clean rag. The woman was crying softly, her face lined with a lifetime of hardship. The man spoke to her in a voice that was barely a whisper, yet it seemed to carry over the noise of the children and the music. He looked at Lito and nodded toward the woman. Lito understood. He stood up, walked over, and took the rag from the man's hands. The man smiled, stood up, and moved into the shadows, leaving Lito to finish the task. Touching the rough, tired skin of the old woman's feet, Lito felt a surge of emotion he couldn't name. It was a mixture of grief for his wasted years and an overwhelming joy for this moment of service. He realized that the greatest power in the world wasn't the ability to command others, but the willingness to serve them. The unrighteous structures of his ego had finally collapsed, not through a lightning bolt, but through the quiet, persistent truth of love. He was no longer looking for miracles. He was part of one. The clinic would provide medicine, but the love they shared would provide the healing. Lito looked at his hands, now wet and dirty, and saw them for what they were, instruments of a much higher purpose. The most profound transformations happen when we stop trying to be gods and start learning to be brothers. If you believe that true leadership is found in serving others, please like this video, subscribe to our channel, and share this story with someone who needs a reminder of God's grace. As the stars began to appear over the Visayan Sea, Lito walked to the shore. The man in the white shirt was standing by the water, looking out at the vast, dark expanse. He turned as Lito approached. "You have traveled a long way, Lito," the man said. His voice was like the sound of the tide, deep and rhythmic. Lito nodded. "I have, Lord, and I don't want to go back to who I was." The man placed a hand on Lito's shoulder. His touch was warm, and in that moment, Lito felt every burden he had ever carried simply evaporate. "You are not going back," the man said. You are just beginning to walk." Then, with a gentle smile, the man turned and walked along the shoreline until he was lost in the silver light of the moon. Has Lito finally found the peace he spent his whole life trying to buy with gold and status? Lito lived in Manila for many more years, but he was no longer the man the city once knew. He sold his mansion in Forbes Park and moved to a modest house closer to the people he now served. His gold watch was gone, replaced by a simple wooden cross given to him by Ramon. He spent his days managing a foundation that didn't just give money, but taught people how to build their own futures. He realized that the Bible Corazon held so dearly was not a book of magic, but a blueprint for a life of purpose. Every time he faced a difficult choice, he remembered the quiet man in the white shirt. He remembered that truth does not need to shout to be heard, and that power is only real when it is used to protect the weak. Corazon lived to see the clinic in Cebu become a center of hope for thousands, passing away peacefully with Lito holding her hand and reading her favorite verses. The story of Lito is a reminder that no heart is too hard for the touch of grace. He didn't find God in a spectacular miracle, but in the quiet presence of a stranger and the suffering of his own family. He learned that while money can buy medicine, it cannot buy the peace of a clear conscience. The unrighteous structures of his old life had fallen, and in their place, something eternal was built. He often traveled back to Cebu, sitting on the same shore where he last saw the man. He didn't look for him anymore, because he knew that as long as he chose mercy over pride, the man was already there. His life became a quiet prayer, a testament to the fact that when we lose our illusions, we finally find our souls. If this story reminded you that God sees every struggle and acts in his own perfect time, please support us. True change begins with a single step of faith and a heart open to the truth. If you believe that mercy can transform even the toughest heart, please like this video, subscribe to our channel, and write the word faith in the comments to show you believe in the power of quiet transformation.